30 years. 30 years. Long years. Somebody better wake me up from this dream. Ikem. Love has finished me. I am finished. Ikem, I am coming to the city to meet you.
Security, who let this lady in?
Ikem, it's me, your Mimi. The love of your life. Ikem, it will never be well with you. You will beg for water and no one will offer you.
Will her words come to pass? Or will she live the rest of her life regretting the years she spent waiting for Ikem? This is the story of a woman who loved with everything she had: heart, soul, youth, and time. And in return, what did she get?
I promise to love,
disappointment. From the one man she
cherish you
least expected it from.
in sickness.
This is the story of Mimi, a woman who waited 30 solid years of her life for love. Today, she is 48 years old, fragile, broken, and standing at a crossroads she never imagined she would face. A love that began in her youth brought her nothing but pain. And the way she discovered the truth, the most heartbreaking way possible, will leave you shocked. If a prophet had told Mimi that Ikem would one day abandon her, she would have laughed in disbelief. She trusted him completely. She was kind. She was faithful. She was patient, more patient than anyone should ever have to be. Yet here she stands, staring at the ruins of a life built on waiting. This is not just a love story. It is a warning. It is a question. And it is a truth many are afraid to face. Now let us go back to the beginning. A young girl walked slowly along the narrow footpath, an empty clay pot balanced carefully in her hands. Her name was Mimi. The pot was light now, but she knew it would soon be heavy, heavy the way life already felt on her small shoulders. Barefoot, she stepped around stones and fallen leaves, her dress brushing against her knees. Other children often walked this path laughing, splashing water at one another, their voices loud and careless. Mimi walked alone. She had learned early that silence could be a companion too. Mimi was an orphan. She could not remember her parents' faces, only fragments, voices fading like dreams one forgets upon waking. There were no stories of bedtime kisses or strong arms lifting her high into the air. No lullabies sung just for her. Instead, there was her grandmother, an old woman with tired eyes and hands rough from years of work, yet warm enough to feel like home. To Mimi, her grandmother was not just family, she was the beginning and the end of love itself. She was her world, her safety, her everything. In that small mud house at the edge of the village, love did not come in grand gestures. It came in warm meals shared from one bowl, in quiet prayers whispered at night, in the way her grandmother wrapped her in a cloth when the cold crept in, even when there was only one cloth to share. Mimi had never truly experienced love beyond that. She did not know what it felt like to be chosen, to be promised a future, to be assured that someone would stay. What she knew was survival. What she knew was waiting. And what she knew was loyalty learned from a woman who had endured life without complaint. As she reached the stream, Mimi knelt and dipped the pot into the water. Ripples spread across the surface, distorting her reflection. For a moment, she stared at the girl in the water, small, quiet, unsure of what the world would demand of her next. She did not know then that this same girl would one day give her heart without holding anything back. She did not know that love would come, not gently, but like a promise whispered too early. She did not know that waiting so familiar, so innocent would follow her into adulthood and cost her more than she could imagine. The stream kept flowing. Indifferent to the future it was silently witnessing, and Mimi lifted the pot, now full and heavy, balanced it on her head, and began the long walk home, unaware that this was only the beginning of a lifetime of waiting. The path from the river wound quietly through the village, narrow and familiar, softened by years of bare feet and gentle rains. Mimi walked slowly, the clay pot resting on her head, her thoughts drifting the way they always did toward home, toward her grandmother, toward the small routines that shaped her days. The morning was calm. Too calm. She was almost at the bend that led toward her compound when she saw him. He stood by the roadside, tall and still, his clothes dusty but neat, as though he belonged somewhere far beyond the village. He did not look like someone who had stayed. There was something about him, his posture, the weight in his eyes that spoke of cities, of long journeys, of places that never truly slept. He looked lost. "Please," he said softly as Mimi drew closer, his voice careful, like someone afraid to disturb the world. "Can you show me the path to the river?" Mimi hesitated for only a second before lifting her hand and pointing toward the narrow trail that dipped into the trees. "That way," she said. "Just follow the path down." He followed her finger with his eyes and nodded. Then he smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was tired, sad, the kind of smile people wear when they are trying to be polite while carrying something heavy inside. "Thank you," he said. And without another word, he turned and began walking toward the river. Mimi stood still long after he disappeared from sight. Something wasn't right. She looked down at her hands, then back toward the path. The thought came quietly but firmly he had no pot, no bucket, nothing to fetch water with. So why was he going to the river? Her feet moved before her mind could argue. Curiosity pulled her forward. But it was more than curiosity. It was a tightening in her chest, a feeling she could not name but could not ignore. She followed him. From a distance, Mimi saw him standing at the edge of the river, shoulders shaking. He was crying not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quiet way people cry when they think no one is watching. Mimi slowed, hiding behind a tree, her heart pounding. Then he stepped into the water. At first, she thought he meant to cross, but his steps were wrong, careless. He moved toward the side everyone in the village avoided, the side the elders warned children about, the side where the current was stronger and unforgiving. Fear shot through her like fire. It became clear, suddenly and painfully, that the young man had not come to the river for water. He had come because he had no hope left. "Stop!" Mimi screamed. The clay pot slipped from her head and shattered against the stones, water breaking free from it like it was trapped, but she did not stop to look back. The young man froze at the sound of her voice, his body stiff with shock. "Don't do it!" she cried again, her feet already in the water, her heart racing faster than her breath. She reached him and grabbed his arm, holding on with all the strength her small body could summon. "Let me go," he cried, his voice breaking. "Please, let me end this pain." "No," Mimi sobbed, tightening her grip. "Please don't." Tears streamed down her face as she held him, water swirling around their legs, the river whispering dangerously close. She had never seen anyone's pain look so much like her own. Not in shape, not in sound, not in silence. She would not let go. Slowly, with effort and trembling breaths, they moved back toward the safer edge. When they finally climbed out, both of them shaking, Mimi guided him beneath a nearby tree. They sat on the ground, damp and exhausted, her arms still wrapped around him as though releasing him would undo everything. She did not let him go. When his breathing finally steadied, the words poured out of him like a flood he had been holding back for too long. He told her how he had lost the money he saved for school, how his father had died, how the future he once imagined had slipped through his fingers all at once, how tired he was of trying, of hoping. Mimi listened without interrupting. She held his hand, her thumb brushing over his knuckles the way her grandmother did when words were not enough. "This is not enough reason to end your life," she said gently when he finished. "There is no reason enough for anyone to do that." Her voice was calm, steady, older than her 18 years. He looked at her then, truly looked at her. "What is your name?" she asked. "Ikem," he replied quietly. She nodded. "I'm Mimi." He managed a small laugh. "Ikem means strength, but all I feel is weakness," he said bitterly. Mimi shook her head. Strength is not pretending you don't hurt, she said. Strength is still breathing when everything hurts. Silence settled between them. Where do you stay? She asked. Lagos, he answered. She squeezed his hand. You will go back to school. You will recover what you have lost. You will live a good life. She spoke with such certainty it startled even her. Ikem burst out laughing, as if that was the wildest joke he had ever heard. In his mind, who is this village girl and what does she know about live? She's probably living off her parents and having people provide for her. I am an orphan, Mimi said softly, as if she read his thoughts. His laughter stopped. He looked at her again, really seeing her this time. She lowered her gaze as tears slipped free. I know this hardness, she said. This pain. But I am still here. Still living. She swallowed and continued. You still have your mother. Your siblings. I only have my grandmother. She lifted her head. Everything will be all right, Ikem. They walked home together as the sun climbed higher, their steps slow and quiet. Behind them, the broken pieces of Mimi's shattered pot lay by the riverbank, the only witness to the whispered pains shared that morning. That was the beginning of something gentle, and in that moment, they both learned a truth that would stay with them forever. In life, nothing is worth dying for. Mimi did not leave Ikem's side as they walked back toward the village. Even when he slowed, even when he muttered that he was fine and could go on his own, she stayed close enough that their shoulders almost touched. I won't go back there, he said once, glancing over his shoulder toward the direction of the river. Mimi said nothing, but her hand tightened slightly around his wrist. She did not trust silence anymore. By the time they reached the compound, the sun had climbed higher, warming the earth. Grandma Ozioma sat on a low wooden stool outside the house, sorting dried pepper into a shallow tray. Her hands moved slowly, carefully, the way they did everything. She looked up when she heard footsteps. Her eyes moved from Mimi to the young man beside her, to their soaked clothes. Water dripped steadily onto the ground. Grandma Ozioma did not jump to her feet. She did not shout. She did not demand answers. She simply looked at Mimi for a long moment. Mimi held her gaze. Something passed between them, an understanding that did not need words. Go inside, Grandma said gently. Relief loosened something in Mimi's chest. Inside the small house, Mimi opened the wooden box where their clothes were neatly folded. She brought out one of her late grandfather's wrappers and a loose shirt her grandmother kept for visitors. Change, she told Ikem, placing them in his hands. He hesitated. I don't want to cause trouble. You are not, she said. He changed while she gathered his wet clothes, carrying them outside to wash. She scrubbed them against a flat stone, her hands moving with quiet focus, as though this simple act could steady everything that had almost fallen apart earlier. When she finished, she wrung them out and spread them over a rope behind the house. The ordinary rhythm of work softened the heaviness in the air. When she returned inside, Ikem sat on a low stool, shoulders still tense, eyes lowered. Mimi knelt beside her grandmother. Grandma, she said softly, can I give him food? Grandma Ozioma looked at the boy again. His fingers were clasped tightly together, as though he expected to be turned away. There is food, Grandma said. Serve him. Mimi rose quickly. She scooped warm gari and soup into a bowl and placed it before him. Ikem stared at it for a moment, before eating, slowly at first, then with the hunger of someone who had not eaten properly in days. Grandma Ozioma watched quietly. Who are your parents? She asked after a while. Ikem swallowed. Late Mazi Okeki and Mrs. Okeki. Grandma's eyebrows lifted slightly. Okeke from Umuoka Quarter? Yes, Ma. Mimi looked between them, surprised. I am from this village, Ikem explained. But we lived in the city for many years. His voice was steadier now, but the tiredness remained. After my father died, things changed. We couldn't keep up with life there. School fees, bills, everything. He paused. My mother tried. Grandma nodded slowly. I was attacked one evening, he continued. They took everything. The money I saved, gone. Mimi's hands tightened in her lap. We couldn't pay rent anymore. The landlord drove us out. My mother and my 2 younger siblings. His voice trailed off. We came back to the village with nothing. Silence filled the room. Outside, a goat bleated. A bird flapped from the roof. It has been hard, Ikem finished quietly. Grandma Ozioma sighed, a deep sound that seemed to come from many years of seeing life bend people without breaking them. You are alive, she said. That means your story is not finished. Ikem lowered his eyes. Mimi sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched again. You will rest here today, Grandma added. Tomorrow will think about itself. Those words settled over the room like a covering. For the first time since Mimi had seen him on the path, Ikem's breathing slowed without force. His hands unclenched. He did not look like someone carrying the whole world alone anymore. Mimi watched him from the corner of her eye. Something had shifted. The morning had begun with water flowing endlessly past the riverbank. Now, under a small roof at the edge of the village, 2 young people sat side by side, sharing food, silence, and the fragile beginning of understanding. Outside, Mimi's broken pot lay in pieces near the path where she had dropped it earlier. Inside, something new had quietly taken its place, and though neither of them spoke of it, both felt it. A moment where one life reached for another and did not let go. That night, after Ikem had fallen asleep on the mat Grandma Ozioma spread for him, Mimi sat beside the old woman under the dim lantern light and told her everything: how she had found him by the river, how close she had come to losing him, how afraid she had been. Grandma listened without interrupting, her fingers folded around her walking stick. When Mimi finished, Grandma spoke quietly. What happened today stays in this house. People talk carelessly. The boy is already carrying enough. Mimi nodded. She understood. The next morning, Ikem wore his dried clothes, now neatly folded. Grandma packed vegetables and tubers into a small sack for him to take to his mother. Greet her for me, Grandma said. Yes, Ma, Ikem replied. Mimi walked him to the edge of the path. Neither spoke much, but something warm and unspoken settled between them. That was how it began. Soon Ikem's mother and 2 younger sisters heard about Mimi, about the girl who had helped him, fed him, and stood beside him when he needed someone. In the days that followed, Mimi and Ikem grew close. They talked while fetching firewood, while working the soil, while sitting under the mango tree in the evenings. Ikem told her stories about the city streets filled with cars, lights that stayed on through the night, buildings so tall they seemed to touch the sky. Mimi, only 18 and never having left the village, listened with wide eyes, building pictures in her mind. Friendship slowly became something deeper. People noticed. They were always together. Some girls whispered that Mimi was wasting her time. Everyone knew Ikem's family had nothing, only needs, nothing to give back. But Mimi was not counting. She was hard-working. Even at her age, she had small farmland of her own. She had finished secondary school and dreamed of going to the city someday to study. That was why she farmed, to save for her future. Yet when Ikem's family struggled, she divided her stored harvest into 2 and gave them half to plant. People talked more. One afternoon, 2 women stopped her on the path. Be careful, they warned. Don't pour everything you have into a bottomless basket. Mimi only smiled. She was not expecting anything in return. Ikem and his family tried farming too, but it was not easy for them. Their harvest was poor. One afternoon, Mimi sat at home peeling cassava when Ikem walked in, holding his small phone. His face was serious. I have news, he said. My results are out. I scored high. I got admission into the University of Lagos. Mimi's face lit up. That's wonderful, he shook his head. I won't be going. Why? She asked. He sighed deeply. Money. You will go, Mimi said firmly. We'll work on people's farms and save. Before the time comes, we'll see what we have." And that was what they did. They worked on other people's farms, and Mimi saved the money carefully. Soon, the time for him to return to the city drew near. A week before his departure, Mimi went to the market. The night before he was to leave, she arrived at his house carrying 2 large bags. "Auntie Mimi, good evening," his little sister said, running inside to call him. Ikem came out. "What are these?" he asked, opening the bags. Inside were neat trousers, white shirts, a blue polo, and new shoes. He stared, speechless. "Mimi," he said softly, pulling her into a hug. In the second bag were food supplies: gari, rice, yam, oil, enough for the semester. His mother began dancing with joy. "God has given me a good daughter," she said happily. Mimi laughed. Then she brought out the money they had saved, 400,000. Ikem could not contain his excitement. He lifted her up, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Now you can go back to school," Mimi said, smiling. "I will," he promised. "I will never forget this." His sisters carried the bags inside while Ikem walked Mimi home, holding her hand. "Mimi," he said softly, "you deserve the world." That was how Mimi began building a future with Ikem. Ikem eventually left for the university, the dreams he had almost buried slowly coming back to life. Each step he took in that new world carried the memory of Mimi's voice steady, certain, refusing to let him give up. He never forgot that if their paths had not crossed that day, his life might have gone in another direction entirely. Back in the village, Mimi made the phone booth her second home. She called Ikem whenever she could, sometimes just to hear his voice, sometimes to pass messages from his family. She became a bridge between him and home. She also did more than that. Mimi took Ikem's family as her own. She worked beside his mother on the farm, teaching her patiently how to plant in rows, how to space crops, how to know when the soil was ready. Slowly, things improved. His mother grew stronger and more confident. His sisters helped too. The family that once depended on help began to stand on their own. One evening, during a school holiday, Ikem returned. Grandma Azioma's face lit up when she saw him. "You are shining," she said proudly. Mimi stood behind her, smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. Ikem looked different, healthier, more confident, like someone walking toward a future instead of running from life. He brought gifts. From his bag, he brought out 2 smartphones. In the city, he had been doing small jobs to support himself, saving little by little. One of the phones was for Mimi. Her hands trembled as she held it. "Thank you," she said, her voice full of joy. 3 years passed. Mimi, now 21, had grown into a beautiful young woman. She opened a small shop where she sold foodstuffs. From her earnings, she still sent small amounts of money to Ikem whenever she could. Ikem's mother could now manage the farm well. His sisters were learning fast. Their home no longer felt helpless. All because one girl had chosen kindness. But time was moving. Suitors began to come for Mimi. Serious ones. They visited Grandma with baskets of farm produce, showing their intentions. Grandma wanted Mimi to marry a man who would love her, respect her, and build a family with her. Mimi herself did not fully understand what she and Ikem were. They loved each other deeply, but their bond felt like friendship, family, and something more all at once. One evening, she called Ikem. She told him suitors were coming, that she had helped him willingly and expected nothing in return. She did not realize, until then, how she had quietly paused her own dream of going to school in the city. On the phone, Ikem's voice broke. He cried. "I thought we had a future together," he said. "I already see you as my wife. Please, wait for me a little longer." That was when the promises began. Mimi told him, "If you are serious, tell Grandma yourself." Not long after, a wealthy man named Obina came from the city to ask for her hand. He was calm, well-spoken, and promised Mimi could return to school. Grandma approved immediately. Mimi stood at a crossroads. Ikem was furious when he heard. He returned to the village and knelt before Grandma, begging, "I'm almost done with school. I'll get a job. I will marry Mimi," he pleaded. Grandma refused. She knew what Mimi had done for him, but she did not want Mimi to tie her life to waiting for a future that was not yet certain. She was thinking like an adult, weighing both hope and reality. But Mimi's heart had already chosen. Seeing Ikem kneel, hearing his words, made her believe him fully. She refused Obinna. The man left disappointed. Grandma was upset for days, but she would not force Mimi into a life she did not want. Because in the end, it was Mimi who would live that life. And Mimi had chosen love. Ikem begged his mother to speak on his behalf, and she did. She went to Grandma Ozioma and spoke gently, reminding her of the bond between the two young people and of Mimi's sacrifices. After that, it became almost understood in the village that Mimi was Ikem's future wife. Still, the suitors did not stop coming. 3 years later, Ikem finished school, completed his youth service, and soon after secured work with a large oil firm in Lagos. When he returned to the village after his service year, Mimi was 24. They spent every moment they could together, walking familiar paths, sitting under trees, talking about the future as though it were already written. "I'll bring you to the city," Ikem promised. "Once things settle. When you're 26, we'll marry. Marriage is not for children. You must be ready." Mimi never argued. Engineer Ikem knew more about the world than she did. She believed. He returned to Lagos and not long after called with good news. The company where he had served wanted him permanently. His joy filled the phone. Mimi and his family celebrated as though it were their own victory. Then Ikem asked her to come to the city for his welcome party. It was Mimi's first time leaving the village. Everything felt too fast, too bright, too big. The buildings stretched high into the sky. The company car that came to pick her up left her staring in awe. Ikem welcomed her warmly, proudly. That night marked a new closeness between them, one that made Mimi feel both nervous and deeply connected. She trusted him completely. To her, they already belonged to each other. At the party, Mimi felt out of place among strangers who spoke polished English and wore fine clothes. But she stood tall beside Ikem as he stepped fully into his new life as an engineer. After that, Ikem visited her room often whenever she came to the city. He spoke of the future, of plans, of the life they would build. 2 more years, he would say. When you are 26. The 2 years passed. Instead of marriage, Ikem moved his family from the village to the city. Then came another goal. "I want to buy a big house first," he told her. "For us," Mimi cried that day. The waiting felt heavy, but Ikem spoke gently, painting pictures of a better future, of children growing up with everything they never had. 4 years, he promised. "I'll have houses in Lagos and the village." She believed him. Grandma Ozioma called her one afternoon and sat her down. "You are not getting younger. Ikem should come and marry you." "He will, Mama. I want to see great-grandchildren." "You have waited 8 years. That is enough." Mimi only smiled. "You will see, Mama." People began to talk. They said her relationship had lasted longer than some marriages, longer than university courses. Mimi ignored them. She believed in Ikem's determination. 5 years later, Ikem owned the biggest house in the village. Mimi and Grandma often visited to check on the building. Grandma was proud, but at night worry crept in. If he could build all this, why was marriage still far away? Whenever Ikem visited, he brought food for Grandma, clothes for Mimi, gifts that kept hope alive. Mimi would sit proudly in front of his car, certain everyone knew where she belonged. At 31, Mimi believed the waiting was finally ending. Ikem had the house. Surely now, nothing stood in the way. But when Mimi believed the waiting was finally over, life shifted again. Ikem came home with big news, his eyes shining with excitement. I'm leaving the country, he said. There's an opportunity abroad, a serious business, and I'll get another degree, a master's in engineering. Mimi stared at him, the words refusing to settle. Marriage doesn't stop dreams, Ikem, she said quietly, her voice trembling. Being your wife won't hold you back. He held her hands. I've already started processing my papers. I'll bring you to England someday. You deserve it. Someday. That word followed Mimi like a shadow. What she received instead were gifts. New clothes, new hairstyles, new shoes, beautiful things, but not the one thing her heart longed for. Her small shop in the village no longer existed. Ikem had told her not to stress herself. He sent money for her upkeep. And Mimi, believing his success was theirs together, paused her own life. She cheered him on, prayed for him, encouraged him to keep rising. Everyone already knows you're my wife, Ikem would say. I want the loudest wedding. I'll take you abroad right after. We'll have our children there. You won't lack anything. Still, years passed. 7 years of Mimi's life had gone into waiting. Mrs. Okeke watched her son's success with pride. She remembered when they had nothing. Now her daughters were educated, one even married. Yet the young woman who had stood with them from the beginning remained unmarried. When Mimi approached her one afternoon, her voice was gentle. Mama, please talk to Ikem. Let him come and perform the marriage rites. He can travel anywhere after that. Mrs. Okeke smiled and nodded, but worry stirred in her heart. Mimi was 31 now. She wondered silently about time, about children, about the future. Yet she could not speak those fears aloud. Mimi had been too good to them. Still, she did not press Ikem. She too dreamed of traveling abroad, and through her son, those dreams felt possible. Only Ebere, Ikem's younger sister, spoke openly. Auntie Mimi, why is my brother delaying? She would ask, shaking her head. But Ikem had made up his mind. He was leaving the country. When Mimi realized he meant it, something inside her broke quietly. She returned to the village, hoping distance might make him reconsider. Instead, news came that he had traveled. Mimi stayed in the village alone, carrying her pain in silence. Grandma Azioma fell ill. Even from her sickbed, she would say, Mimi, you are not married yet. The words cut deeply. Suitors no longer came. People believed she already belonged to Ikem. The whole village waited for the day he would return to claim his wife. But Mimi waited alone, holding on to promises that felt farther away each day. 5 months passed with no word from Ikem. No calls. No messages. His Nigerian number stopped going through. Every night Mimi lay awake, staring into the darkness. Her heart filled with questions she could not answer. Fear and confusion sat beside her like unwanted companions. She told herself to be strong, to move on, but her heart would not obey. The village made it worse. They called her Ikem's wife. The name followed her everywhere, at the market, at the stream, on the road. Other men stayed away. No one wanted to come between a woman and the man she had waited for. On the 6th month, her phone beeped. An alert. Money had entered her account from another country. Her hands shook as she opened Facebook. There was a message request. From Ikem. He apologized. Said things had been difficult. Promised to stay in touch. He reminded her they were in this life together. He was 33 now, working hard for their future. And just like that, the waiting continued. But this time, it felt easier to wait for the man she had known almost all her life than to start over with someone new whose intentions she could not read. Ikem spoke of success, of progress, of building something great. In chasing the best life possible, he slowly grew selfish, forgetting the girl who once stood between him and despair. Still, he called sometimes, sent money, made promises. When I come back, we will marry. Mimi lacked nothing financially. Her account grew, but inside, she felt emptier each year. She had paused her own dreams for so long she no longer remembered what they looked like. 17 years passed. 17 years of calls that ended in arguments, of tears wiped away before anyone could see, of hope rising and falling like the seasons. What Mimi did not know was this. Ikem had returned to Nigeria more than 5 years ago, and he had not come for her. In the city, he had met someone else, a young woman, 26, ambitious, full of new dreams. She was from Umuaka quarter in his village. Somewhere along the way, Ikem began planning a future with her. Mimi knew nothing. She was now 48. Grandma Ozioma lay frail and weak, barely able to move. Mimi's whole life had narrowed into one long wait. No husband, no child, no education, no business, no house of her own. Only promises, only years gone, only the echo of a love she believed in with all her heart. That night felt like any other. Mimi had just finished chatting with Ikem. His words were soft, familiar, full of future promises as always. She lay on her bed, phone still in her hand, a faint smile resting on her lips. The room was quiet except for the sound of crickets outside. She opened Facebook absent-mindedly. Her thumb scrolled without focus until she reached Ikem's profile. She liked looking at his pictures, sometimes the suits, the offices, the city lights. It made her feel like she was part of his life. Then she saw it. A comment under his photo. "Congratulations, my man." Her heart did not jump. Congratulations were normal. Promotions, projects, achievements. Ikem was always rising. But something nudged her. She clicked on the commenter's name. Her breath stopped. Photos. Pictures. Smiles. A woman. A ring. Captions filled with joy. Engagement, celebration. Her vision blurred. She clicked back to Ikem's page, her fingers trembling now. There it was more comments. More praise. And Ikem had replied, "Thanks, bro." The room spun. Her ears rang as if someone had struck metal beside her head. Ikem, engaged? Her chest tightened painfully. She could hear her heartbeat in her throat. It felt unreal, like a bad story someone was telling about her life. With shaking hands, she dialed Ebere. The phone rang. "Auntie Mimi," Ebere answered. Mimi's voice came out thin. "Is it true that Ikem is getting married?" Silence. Then a soft, broken voice. "Auntie Mimi, it's true. He brought his fiancée home some days ago. He said you both stopped being together over 10 years ago." The words did not make sense. Mimi laughed suddenly. A sharp, empty sound. "I just spoke with him tonight. Is this a joke? Auntie Mimi, I'm sorry. I thought you knew. When he left the country, I thought everything ended." Mimi ended the call. The thatched roof above her seemed to spin. The walls felt too close. She stood up, then sat down again. This cannot be happening," she cried. Ikem." Her voice broke into the night. Tears poured freely now. 30 years. 30 long years of love, of waiting, of believing. And he had knelt before another woman. Far away, Ikem sat in a well-furnished room. His fiancée moved about happily, arranging things, her laughter light. His life looked complete. Money was no longer a problem. He had cars, houses, status. Yet somewhere behind the comfort sat a truth he refused to face. He had left behind a woman who once held him back from the edge of darkness. He told himself Mimi would understand, that life had moved on, that she was part of his past. But deep down, he knew. Money could not return the years she waited. Success could not erase promises spoken on bent knees. And somewhere in a quiet village house, Mimi sat on the floor, her world shattered in silence. Find out what happens next in part 2. Thank you so much for watching. We truly appreciate every one of you. Welcome to Tales by NFC, where we share life-changing, heartfelt, and emotional stories that stay with you long after they end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Also, would you like us to start adding animation? Or do you prefer realistic images with our stories? Let us know what you enjoy most. See you in the next part.